Okay, you're live on YouTube. Have a good meeting.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome to the January 25th, 2021 Lincoln County Planning Commission meeting. At this time, I'd like for Joshua to call the roll.
Andra Bobbitt,
Here.
Perry Bugenhagen,
Here, present.
Shaylin Stratton,
Here.
Judy Pelletier,
Here.
Phil Spolnick,
Here.
Dick Cutler,
Here.
Scarlett Kerr,
Here.
and Misty Lambert.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask staff to summarize where we're at and what the proceedings for this evening and what our decision criteria will be.
Okay. For the record, I'm Jerry Herbage. It says Michael, but don't believe that. I'm actually Jerry Herbage. And I'm assistant counsel, county counsel for Lincoln County. And I'd like to briefly go over the procedure. And I think then John will follow up with put in the details and talk a little bit more about the decision criteria and in the staff that was in the staff report earlier. So we'll be try to be brief here. We are here in a virtual procedure. So this is what we've done for each of the prior meetings. And this is based on being in the COVID era. So this hearing is being conducted in accordance with House Bill 4212, which authorizes governing bodies of public bodies to conduct all public meetings by using things like video conferencing technology, which we're doing here. So there's not going to be direct interaction with the public. Let's talk about how this started. Our first meeting for this quasi-judicial proceeding was on November 23rd, 2020. What happened? Do we get some feedback here? Okay. Anyway, what happened was that around the time that we convened, I think shortly before, we got a request from the applicant, Georgia Pacific, on their conditional use permit application to have a continuance. But our staff had already sent out the notice. So the way we handled that is that the staff went over the staff report, and then the Planning Commission did grant the continuance, but at the same time posed certain questions that were directed to Georgia Pacific to get back with the county with answers to those questions. So on January 11th was the date that the next hearing was conducted. The Planning Commission convened and received about a 29-minute presentation from the applicant, Georgia Pacific. The Planning Commission also asked additional questions to the applicant, and those were transcribed and sent off to the applicant, Georgia Pacific. The record was left open for 7 days with the opportunity for any parties who wanted to ask for the record to be held open beyond those 7 days, but that didn't happen. So what happened was the applicant on January 18th submitted their last submittal, their last bit of information into the record for this Planning Commission to consider. And in an email to John O'Leary, Georgia Pacific, through their attorney Allison, waived in writing the submittal for final argument. So that's a legal right, but it can be waived. And so what we need to know now is that the record is closed. The record is closed. And the purpose for today's meeting basically is for the Planning Commission to deliberate to reach a decision. And I think we went over before this whole proceeding process, we had some training, and you know, we have some real experienced planning commission members and we have some new ones, but your decision must be made based upon the decision criteria and the evidence in the record. So I just want to say that your decision to approve or deny must be based upon the standard. The standard is substantial evidence in the whole record. And substantial evidence is evidence a reasonable person would rely upon in reaching a decision. So whether you approve or deny, it's to be based on substantial evidence. The way that works is after staff is done going over this background and decision criteria, it's really, if there's any questions of staff, you can ask staff, but there's, the record is closed and basically you would begin to deliberate. At some point. The chair would see what direction planning commission is going and call for a motion. Under the law, any motion should be approved by a minimum of 5 planning commission members. Okay, it's a 9-member body, takes 5 to approve. And also what I would like to say is that we're on a tight time frame to get everything done. 150 days. I think the 150 days includes the resolution of all matters, including the possible appeals. And that date is around March 20th. I think, John, that's right. So the point to be made is I would ask the planning commission, after you've made a decision, an oral decision tonight, to move to reconvene a week from today to adopt a final written order. So I'd like you to consider that, because we really need that to be able to stay on track to get this done within the time frames the law allows. If there's any questions about procedure, feel free to ask. And also, John, or Anno, if you feel you need to add to what I went over, that's fine. Other than that, I think John did want to go over the decision criteria. Give some instruction on that.
Just let me make sure, just to restate what Jerry said. So we're anticipating once these formalities of getting prepped, or that you'll deliberate with questions for staff, take a vote tonight, and then have a motion later, at least to make sure a week from today that we're reconvening, just as many of you know, to adopt the findings of whatever decision you make tonight. That's right, Jerry. That's right. The deliberation vote, and then next week we would have a set of findings for you to hopefully approve, reflecting what happens tonight.
Yeah, that's the idea. Findings would be attached to a final order, which would also give some background about how the decision was arrived at and so on. But that's right, Anno. I think that's just right on. So that's what I have.
Okay. Madam Chair, Honorable Commissioners, so just to, and Jerry summed up and recapped the journey of the record to date, so to speak. So just briefly, so that you kind of get a flavor for what the interaction has been with the applicant. There's the initial application dated July 23rd, 2020. We sent a letter to the applicant August 17th. We asked for some more information. They responded on September 2nd. At that point, they indicated they felt their application was complete. That's the date that the application was determined to be complete. We prepared a staff report. We held a hearing initially on November 23rd. The applicant asked for the continuance. Based on the information in the staff report, they wanted to provide more information, and they had the opportunity to respond to the Planning Commission's questions that were posed on the November 23rd hearing date. We received additional material prior to the January 11th continuance. That material is distributed to the Planning Commission. We discussed receipt of that material. I think everybody's reviewed that. Had some additional questions on January 11th. The applicant responded to those questions with a letter that was dated it's the 18th. No, I'm sorry, January 8th. with two other submittals, an additional, actually, I'm sorry, the January 8th was the initial submittals for the January 11th meeting. The last letter we received
Is the 18th.
was received on the 18th. And then that responded to the final set of questions that the commission had posed on the 11th. So,
Hey, John, when did GP give their, what date again was that when they gave their video presentation? That was
their video presentation was on January 11th. So
Yeah.
and that was and then we've made all that material available to the public. It's all been it's all accessible on our website and to the Planning Commission as well. So at this point, I'm just kind of going to go back in time and recap from the initial staff report. You've got the material and the information, at hand. So staff's, recommendation to the Planning Commission is that it focuses deliberations on the general standards associated with the conditional use permit under our code section 1.1630 sub 1. But the key threshold here is, these primary considerations in the code, which are, is the site under consideration suitable for the proposed use? And is the proposed use compatible with the existing and projected uses in the surrounding lands? So these are the primary criteria for making a decision on this application tonight. There's some options here. So depending on how the Planning Commission, decides, if the Planning Commission makes a application or makes a determination that this is approvable and directs at that point you can direct the applicant to prepare findings, suitable for the final order, and then Jerry will give you some specific, details about how that process is going to go. And then the other option is if the Planning Commission, alternatively decides to deny the request, then you're going to want to set forth the rationale, cite the applicable criteria, as you've determined that it's not being met by the application, and then direct staff to prepare a final order based on that. In the event there's an approval, staff has some recommended conditions that were in the staff report. They're 1 through 6. The first two of them are the first one is pretty basic. It goes almost in every, approval. It's, basically it's a perfunctory statement that says, the application or the approval is based on the application that's presented. So it's something that we can talk about when we get to that point, assuming, we get to that point. The next 5 conditions that staff recommended, and this is given, this is recommended several months ago before the supplemental information that was provided by the applicant. Those conditions include, recommendation that the applicant apply for and receive a floodplain development permit as a condition of approval of this, that the applicant apply for and receive all regulatory permits through the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. That's actually listed in our criteria. There's a recommendation that you put a condition in there that the applicant also receive any permits through Oregon Department of State Lands and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. There was a recommendation, there still is a recommendation that you limit the applicant's construction activity between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. You may want to discuss that further. And then there's a final recommendation that the property shall be fenced to prevent blowing debris from, landfill site. We need to discuss that if that's something you want to discuss. That's probably inapplicable at this point based on the complete, what is now the complete application in the record. But again, you can discuss that when we get to that point. But the primary, primary recommendation from staff is that you focus on those 2 criteria. Is the site under consideration suitable for the proposed use based on the record? And is the proposed use compatible with the existing and projected uses on surrounding land? So at this point, are there any questions from the Planning Commission on staff's report?
Good job, John. If you refer to the original staff report, the crux of it is the last two pages, pages 19 and 20 that John was referring to. So that's a good basis to keep you focused. So we're reconvening this hearing, although the record's closed. It's case file 20-C-PP20 for the record. We are in a deliberation phase, so you can ask each other questions. I don't know how sensitive our mics are with this, and so if you can try to keep yourself muted and turn it on when you want to speak, or raise your hand, that would be most excellent, just to keep your barking dogs, which I haven't heard any, off the record. We should also note that we did receive, I don't remember, I was looking at something, some letters in opposition for the original hearing, and then after the second hearing, we received a letter from a Jacob Moose from Toledo, Oregon, who lives close by. So hopefully everyone got a chance to look at those materials as well. All right. So, commissioners, how are people feeling about this application? And again, is the site considered suitable for this use? And is the proposed use compatible with existing and projected uses on surrounding lands? Anyone like to start?
Well,
Terry.
Terry will start. I've given this whole situation, some thought, and I find basically the whole application process is going to, I hope I don't say this wrong, but it's not, the application is not finished, because we don't know what their plan is in addressing some of the environmental and other issues, which are not our purview, but impacts land use. That's number one. Number two, if I remember correctly, in the data that's come to us before, there has not been land use permit issued for this site. Am I correct in stating that, John?
We've never issued a land use permit for the existing use, which would be the landfill and the ponds. But keep in mind that when those uses were established, there were no land use permits to issue.
Exactly. And I want to make that point. So, like other regulatory issues that come up, if there's not been a use permit or permitting or a licensing or approval prior, because there wasn't any criteria established, then it puts us in a bad way saying no. But on the other hand, we have a choice? And I don't believe we do. And let the thing float up through the organizations in the state, so that those other organizations that may have an interest, say for instance in the structural integrity of the ponds, and the engineering that's going on for the work on the ponds, that they would get a chance to do it further on down the line beyond the planning commission. So I would suggest that we deny Georgia Pacific's request for a, I don't know what to call it, except to look at their application, which tells you that it's a landfill permit renewal. But I just don't find the renewal appropriate. There's a lot of things that are wrong. I mean, for instance, where they're located from an environmental standpoint, bad choices. At the time, fine, but things have changed. Size. What other alternatives did they have as far as landfill applications, both close by or even as far east as Corvallis, in a trucking operation and a rail operation? So my thought is we should deny their application.
Okay. So I don't know if we can deny it on the basis of what other opportunities or things that they could do instead of this, because this is an application on this piece of land where it is to expand this landfill. It's not, we don't need to solve their problems or also be kind of bullied by what else they could do if we don't approve this. It's, again, but your point being, it's environmentally perhaps not compatible with the current situation, I think is what I'm hearing from you. Phil, you have something to say? Phil?
Yeah, I totally disagree with Terry. GP's been there since 1958. There was no zoning ordinances during that time. There was no use permits. I've lived in Walport since 1967, and I can recall whenever we'd get a northeast wind, you'd smell that pulp mill clear down in Walport, and now you don't. And it's for several reasons. Number one, the government controls, paper mills, and the technology has grown so much. But the reason I disagree with Terry is I believe they met all the standards, and I thought their video presentation was excellent. And for the people that oppose this because of the odor, unless they moved in prior to 1958, I don't think that what they think makes a difference, because they knew when they bought that property that they're right next to a pulp mill. How can you miss it? And they are trying with all the technology they have with this BioWish to do away with any odors. And but it's my feeling that when you buy property in Toledo, you're going to pay less for it, mainly because of the pulp mill. But I've had many friends over the years work there, and they say the smell is the smell of green. And that is good paying jobs, being able to buy a home, being able to support your family. But I think GP has met all their requirements. And, my background is in fisheries biology. I have a degree from Oregon State in that. And I really worry about any waterway, if it's being polluted or not. But they've had those ponds in there for years and years and years. And there's no evidence that there's ever been any really bad pollution. And they grow oysters, 4 miles down the bay, and people all over the West and all over the United States buy oysters from the Aquina Bay Oyster Company. And no, I believe they met all their qualifications. And if there are any environmental concerns, That's for the state and the federal government to take care of. That's not for us. And if you think that they're going to pollute, unless you have a degree in biochemistry, and you can convince me otherwise, no, that's what the state and the federal government do when they issue permits. And they're going to do all this. But first, we have to give them, they have to go through us. And they've met, as far as I'm concerned, all the criteria that's been presented. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Any other commissioners? How are you feeling? Jalen, you're not muted, so I'm going to call on you.
Okay. I'm going to be a little bit long-winded. I happen to agree with Phil, but for different reasons. The first thing is we are only evaluating the proposal to change their use of a portion of an existing footprint from the liquid sludge to a solid state sludge. We aren't analyzing impacts from other parts of it. We aren't analyzing odor from the pulp mill itself. And I think that that's a mistake a lot of people make, is that they can look at it and go, well, there's all these things that are wrong, but unfortunately, those things have been there, and it's not up to us to evaluate that particular thing, except as a possibility for cumulative impacts. They've proposed, both the planning department and GP has proposed a number of mitigation measures to cover the impacts or even potential impacts that this particular portion of the project might happen. They have proposed seismic stabilization of the one portion of the berm reach 1 that didn't have the strongest area. That would address any potential impacts from the Cascadia earthquake event. They have agreed to use biowash for odor control if there are additional odor impacts. They have agreed to limit their operations, construction operations, to daylight hours only in response to comments from the public. They have agreed to have water trucks available to spray down and dust control that might be generated during the construction. The existing company requirements for that for any of those ponds includes groundwater monitoring, erosion control, and that will also apply to the landfill area, the new one that they're proposing. They are, if we approve the conditional use permit, they are still going to be required to have permits from a number of agencies, as Jerry mentioned earlier, and so did John. They've submitted an erosion and sediment control plan that addresses any issues from the construction site. They've also agreed to purchase credits with the nearby Pixieland Mitigation Bank to offset the filling of the wetlands area. I agree that the fencing really is not applicable considering what's already there. I do have a couple of suggestions for additional mitigation measures that I'd like us to consider. And that is that the active construction be limited to 6 days a week instead of 7, basically to give the neighbors a break from the traffic and the noise. I would like to recommend that they notify neighbors and any interested parties prior to the start of each construction phase, and indicate the length of that construction activity, any potential odor, noise, or traffic concerns that are specific to that particular construction phase. I recommend that a Butler Bridge Road, which is the public road that they access off the property, would be cleaned of dirt, mud, and debris as necessary to prevent any impacts to the non-project related uses, traffic in the area. And this is something I don't know if we can do, but that the CUP be restricted to the proposed project activities within the existing project footprint only. I also think that the fact that it is a solid, they are going from a liquid to a solid disposal area, will actually lessen the impacts or the potential impacts in the case of leaching, because a solid sludge is less likely to leach. I have to say I have to support the approval of the recommendations, because I think the design, what they're proposing, and the mitigation measures would indicate that both cumulatively and individually, anything that they have proposed would have a less than significant impact. All done.
All right. Well, thank you. That was long, but
Yeah, I knew it would be.
yes. Judy, you are not muted. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I tend to agree with both Phil and Shaylin. I think it's a great improvement, actually. One of the ponds will be smaller, one of the settling ponds, and it will be going to a solid state. There's been no record of any discharges into the river in the past, and I think we will see a less likelihood of such discharge in any kind of event, flooding event or whatever. And I think it's a good move. So I'll be short.
All right. Misty, Scarlett, or Dick, anyone of you three? Any input?
Yes,
Which way
I
is
would.
it blowing?
I would agree with the proposal.
Okay. Misty?
I agree with the proposal. I think that they have went to great efforts to plan appropriately, and I think they've also researched out other options. And I think this option is the best, not only it's the best for the community when you consider that the alternative would bring much more truck traffic and probably end up costing the city and the people much more in that much extra truck traffic to move. And I think the environmental issues that some of us have had concerns about are not really in our wheelhouse they have other permits to get and other agencies that are in charge of monitoring that, and they're not us. So I'm totally in agreement.
Okay, thank you. And Scarlett, you're ready to say something now?
I appreciate Terry's concern about pre-zoning issues, but it's been a continuous use for all practical purposes. So when I've had to deal with issues that predate zoning issues, I have to show continuous use, and this is there. So I will say that I have a concern about the unknown, and I think that they have provided us as much information as they possibly can to address the unknown. And of course, that would be a seismic event, but they've done a good job. And they've given us as much information, in my opinion, as they can, and it's all solid information. So I'm gonna have to agree that we've got the information based on what we need, and again, you know, within our realm to approve this.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll give you my thoughts. I mean, if you just take this at face value, I would say putting a landfill next to a river that just supplies us with so much, initially I would say no way. However, it has been there, and the part that concerns me the most is the part we're not talking about, or this is not part of the application. That's the liquid part next to the river, and the potential for it going into the river during a seismic event or a big flood or something like that. So I guess I would agree that having it be more solid than liquid actually is a good thing. And if we add some more of the conditions that Shaylin recommended, or said that that GP had already said they would do, but let's put them in as conditions about the time limits on construction, the seismic stabilization, the odor control, the neighbor notification. I think then with all the conditions outlined, that it can be conditioned to be compatible with the surrounding and current use and be a viable proposal. That's my thought. Is there any further discussion about those additional conditions and about the time, construction time, if this goes forward, before we ask for a call for a motion? Terry, did you want to say something else? You're muted, sorry.
Excuse me, I had to take a break to get more batteries. This thing's had heavy use today.
Yeah.
Other community meetings and a long family meeting this afternoon.
Okay, did you have any other additional thoughts on what's been said?
No, in fact, I think a lot of the comments are very appropriate. However, I am concerned about the actual end use and whether that's really appropriate for the land.
Bill, you unmuted yourself. Do you have something else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I agree with Shaylin. I think she should maybe draft a motion. I also agree that probably we don't need fencing, but I did like the idea of maybe a 6-day work week. And so we should probably try to prepare a motion that we can vote on.
Okay.
I have something I wanted to say. So we received 2 different letters from people in the community, and I just want to say that the one was worried about well water, which they've already agreed to do the ground testing. They've always done the ground testing. I don't think that the well water would be at any more risk if it was a solid than a liquid. It would probably actually be better. And again, that's not really our place. There's another agency that deals with that. And the other letter we got, I think it, again, to back with what Phil said, unless they bought the home prior to 1920, I think he said, that they were well aware that they were moving next to a mill. And I think that to go back now and say, well, the mill has to do something different because you live there. I mean, I just think that the land will be much better in a solid than the liquid. I think it's great movement. I just wanted to acknowledge the 2 letters that we did receive.
Yeah, thank you, Misty. Yes, we definitely took their concerns in consideration during all of our deliberations and questions to staff and GP in our earlier meetings. Okay, I think we pretty much, people have made up their minds. So at this time, is there a motion?
Dick once wanted to say something, at least it looked like his.
Dick, did you have something to add?
No, I agree with the suggestion about the 6-day work week. I think that's important. That's a good point.
So, Andrew, I had, if I may,
Yeah.
So Shaylin, I was taking notes. So help me out here in terms of your additional in addition to what John's already put on the table, your additional conditions. I'll repeat them for everybody because I wasn't sure about the 4th one. First one was 6 days, 6 workday weeks, or 6 days a week rather than 7. The second was would notify the neighbors before each construction phase begins. Third one was to make sure the Butler Bridge is cleaned so that any amount of soil or whatever construction activities are not making that a dirty bridge. And what was the 4th? You mentioned something about the conditional use permit. Well, there was a 4th item there, Shaylin, that you had.
There she
Try
is.
that again. I wasn't sure whether what I suggested would be the automatic result of approving the application, or if it was something that we needed to specify. But that was that the project activity that they proposed within the zone or within the parcel that they want rezoned would be restricted to what they were proposing, or rather would that then open the remainder of that parcel up to additional uses that weren't necessarily something that we had already addressed. Does that make sense?
What my note said, and this is Jerry Herbage for the record, I think that you said that the CUP should be restricted to the existing footprint. That's what I heard.
Yes. That was, and like I said, I don't know if our zoning code would allow us to do that or not.
Well, one minor matter was that it's not a rezone, it's a conditional use. The zoning stays the same, so there's not a rezone here.
Oh, okay, that's right.
So that's not an issue. So it's really about if you're approved, if the vote's there to approve the conditional use permit, your question is certainly we need to affirmatively add these. I'm sensing it's the sense of the planning based on everything I've just heard from deliberation. I'm sensing the planning commissioners, all of your fellow planning commissioners, if they're voting for this, would want to add those 3 conditions at the very least. And I think the understanding is that they're and I'd seek confirmation from my colleagues at staff that ultimately we're approving their proposal. So in terms of its scope, it's limited to what they've proposed in the parcels that they've identified.
Yes, I would agree with that by operation of law, they get what they've applied for. So we probably don't need that 4th condition. Just a suggestion there. So that's what I would say.
Because that's already inherent in it. So I think my recommendation to the chair and you fellow commissioners would be that it sounds like there would be someone tonight will make a motion to approve the application subject to the condition. And I would, from my perspective, from what I've heard, to capture what you've wanted to do that I think makes sense, is that you include that you adopt in addition the conditions to staff has recommended in the staff report, plus those 3 additional items: the 6-day work week, the notified neighbors before each construction phase, and some kind of maintenance of Butler Bridge to make sure that it's not going downhill because of the work. Those would be 3 additional conditions on top of the staff conditions.
Yeah, and if I could mention something, I think that's great. I think that gives us a good direction if that's where you're going. And remember, you will get a proposed written order with findings. And so you can look at the conditions and see if it captures what you wanted. And we can make changes to that next week. So, and if there's some reason, I think we need to have them, I think we do need to reconvene next week. If there's something that's come up or something, I mean, we'll deal with it then in terms of the findings. But I think it seems like we're probably ready to go for a motion based on what we said.
I had one other.
Please.
So the applicant did propose a condition, offer a condition to the planning commission in consideration of the Reach 1 berm. I wanted to make sure the planning commission took that into consideration. So yeah.
Thank you, John. Very good catch. But we could have added it later. But
of course,
please restate that.
Sure. I can read the motion to you if you want. Bear with me for just a second. I'm sorry. I have a lot of things open.
If John finds that, what he's referring to, of course, is the GP said that Reach 1 would have that additional pounding of the sand, hardening of the berm, and that's.
I had it down seismic stabilization is
and vibro compaction. Yeah, compaction.
Right. Okay. And then another question I have while you're looking for that. John, would we need to put in, since they offered about the odor control
BioWish, yeah.
Yeah.
Couldn't we, couldn't we state in the motion that that we would make a motion to approve, including mitigation measures that were proposed by the planning department, the applicant, and as proposed during the commission meeting, or something along those lines, to generally cover everything that we've talked about, they've talked about? Are we going to have to go back and elongate it again?
I would defer to our legal counsel on this as well, but to the extent that in this final order that you vote on next week, to have those enumerated, so there's just no question of, for clarity's sake, because those conditions later on, just as from a practical point of view, are extremely important. What we don't need is to be rummaging around staff reports. If there is an issue with GP about this or that, what's best if we go right back to that, to your findings and your vote, and that those things are listed, because that just makes sure that we're all reading from the same hymnal in terms of what's required. And if they want to do anything different from a staff perspective, it's up to us to determine if there's changes to what they want to do. Are they de minimis? Is it something we can approve administratively, or is it something we need to go back to you for an amendment of the conditional use for? So I would prefer that, and I think it makes a lot of sense, and we're there. We really got these things nailed. I think we can give you a set of findings that's going to reflect what I suspect you're about to vote for.
John?
And so are we striking the fencing against the blowing debris, since there's not going to be it? Okay.
I think that was what was suggested. And what I would like to say to the planning commission, I think that most of you understand this. The purpose of your motion largely tonight is to give staff direction on what to prepare. And it is not a land use decision itself. So when you reconvene to approve the final written order, that is the land use decision. So the most important thing that can happen tonight is that you give us good direction. And part of that direction, and what we can talk about it after your motion. Well, let's talk about those aspects later. But you understand what I'm saying is we need direction, and I think you've actually given us pretty good direction so far. And frankly, I think that John or Anno could probably list out the proposed conditions, you know, if that was needed to be repeated again.
It would, right, so if it's helpful for the planning commission tonight, John, what Jerry was just suggesting is that John would march through those boilerplate things that's in the original staff report, so you could, not that you want to go look at them, but he can restate them tonight, and then we can restate what I think now are the 4 or 5 add-on conditions that have been added this evening. And but Jerry, I want to before make sure we don't lose this. Typically, when there's a positive vote, we ask the applicant to draft findings. Are we still in the mode of doing that, or what's your preference?
Well, most jurisdictions, as far as I know, do that, and so I think that that would be a good idea. But the way it works is they draft findings. It goes to our staff here, and our planning department and legal look at them. And then frequently, it depends. They're frequently just findings, so there needs to be an order as well. And so sometimes those are molded into the order. But those are kind of technical things. I think that we need to get through the motion of what the planning commission is voting for tonight, how you feel, and how you expressed yourself. I think that we need to get through that, and then we can take care of a couple of details when we're done.
Okay, so John, you were busily looking up that thing, but I'm not sure now if we need all the technicalities, as long as it's the
I
site.
was just going to verify that the language the applicant proposed was adequate to the planning commission. I figured that would be this would be the appropriate time to consider it. So, so their recommended motion or condition in relationship to that reach one berm, as they described it in their application material, they say they would recommend a condition of approval as follows. Berm reach one, as defined in the applicant's materials, will be stabilized such that it is expected to experience at most 3 feet of vertical deformation during a 9.1 magnitude Cascadia subduction zone earthquake event. Period. The applicant shall demonstrate that reach one has been stabilized to meet this standard utilizing Oregon Department of Transportation seismic guidelines. I have to point this out. This is a nice technical condition, and it's very specific to the standards that they'd be adhering to. So that's good.
Yeah, from a staff perspective, we don't think we can really improve on it. That it's clear, it's actionable. We would more or less grab that and insert that as the right.
So if anybody's got any thoughts or comments on that, yeah, just want to throw that out there for considerations.
Scarlett, you were trying to say something?
I want to visit. I think it sounds good myself.
Okay, hold on. So Scarlett?
I'd like to visit the fence here. For one, I think there's a fence out there already. And we had the visual of the debris, and there's not going to be debris. But there's a part of me that says, what about kids getting curious? And if keeping kids out of there would be, a fence would benefit kids from getting curious, I would say I'm more concerned about a child getting in there or a young kid that wants to go play in a sand pit of some type and debris. So the fence issue seems like a small issue when I think they've already got a lot of fencing around there. And then to take it to the next level, is a fence required around landfills anyway?
Don't know.
Well, they're separately, Go ahead.
I know that there's a gate, it's well gated, so that you can't just access it, by walking down the road. And I think there is some fencing, probably there's some fencing from properties that abut it as well. So I'm not sure that there needs to be additional fencing.
So our code does require, well, it doesn't require, it's a standard of approval for a landfill, but our code was written for a conventional landfill, for the type of landfill you would expect to be open to the public. So Matt Spangler and I think Otto and Jerry, I think we were all in on that conversation at one point about whether that was really applicable to this particular use. And the other consideration is the material they're proposing to place in the landfill is not, it's got to blow around, but the fence isn't going to keep it. I mean, if it turns into dust, it'll blow around. The fence isn't going to keep it in there. I mean, really the effect of the fence would be for security purposes, keeping people out, Commissioner Karen. I think that's probably a good consideration. I also think that there's some geographic issues for fencing. I think actually it would probably create more problems than it would solve in some of the areas around the site to fence that landfill, just because they're dealing with, significant topography, and they actually have to remove vegetation in some cases. And I don't know if that's actually.
Yeah, I think so. It's forested around the southern sides of it, and it's not easily accessible in any respect.
So, Commissioner Peltier pointed out the gate, the main road gate, is gated well, and there's some fencing in that area. But I don't know what else. If you wanted to make a condition relative to, I don't know. I don't even know how to structure that, because it would be a difficult motion to make without having the specifics of the site. So.
Okay, Phil, you have something?
Yeah, my feeling on the fencing is if GP thinks they need fencing, they'll put it up, because, liability, they know all about liability. So I would just leave it up to them. And that's it. But if nobody else is going to make a motion, I would move to approve the application. Did you want to say something, Missy, or?
Yeah, I just wanted to just clarify one thing before we get too far into the motion. When they did the 4 conditions, one of the conditions was maintain Butler Bridge Road. I think it should just say clean debris from Butler Bridge Road, because maintaining a road is a much bigger out of their wheelhouse. I think it should just say cleaning debris. I think that was the intent of that. And I just heard the word maintenance. I just wanted to clarify.
So go ahead, Commissioner Spaulding. So you're moving to approve?
Yeah, I'm moving to approve with the conditions that Shaylin mentioned, and that we will direct GP to draw up the findings, and then the final order will be presented in a week.
Okay.
February 1st.
So Commissioner Spaulding, so let me take a friendly amendments that, so yes, Shaylin's conditions, the original staff conditions.
Correct.
And GP's condition about reach 1. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Except not the fence, removing.
Not the fence.
Not the fence.
That's condition 6 of the staff. So that's your motion, Phil, and that the meeting will be reconvened on February 1st.
Correct. That's my motion.
Okay, great. Is there a second? Terry?
Yes, I will second the motion.
Okay, Terry has seconded the motion. Is there any more further discussion? Okay, at this time, Josh will call. Is there someone?
Yeah,
Yep, me.
Continued till the 1st of February at 7 p.m., right? And
Yes.
virtually like this. Okay.
Okay, so Josh is gonna call for each person's vote.
I have one comment, Andrew.
Okay.
You asked for the comments.
Yeah.
Phil mentioned, or Ano did, I'm not sure which one, that he called out specifically the comment for the berm breach #1. And I think there were several other mitigations that that GP proposed that we want to make sure that that is included as well. So not just the berm breach, but for example, the biowash odor and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
That weren't in the original staff report.
Was that part, Phil, were those part of your additional ones? Those were
Yeah.
Shayla. Okay,
We'll let the staff draw, or,
Okay.
draw stuff, and then we can, next week, we'll have time to review it and
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
add anything or subtract anything.
okay. So we have our motion, we have our second, and now Josh. Call for the vote.
Audra Bobbitt,
Yes.
Terry Bugenhagen,
Yes,
Shaylin Stratton,
Yes.
Judy Pelletier,
Yes,
Phil Skolnick,
Yes,
Dick Cutler,
Yes.
Scarlett Kier,
Yes,
and Misty Lambert.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. That was unanimous. Thank you, everybody. It's been a long, different process. So we will be having, we're just gonna move into planning commission concerns, and I guess the next one is we're gonna be having a meeting next week, February 1st, same format. We'll get a link sent out, and we'll have the findings at least several hours before the meeting for everyone to review before the meeting starts. Are there any other planning commission concerns?
At 7 o'clock?
7
Normal.
o'clock,
Okay.
7 o'clock, February 1st, yeah. Okay? Okay, well,
Very good.
we are complete for the evening.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you, thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone.
good night all.
Thank you.